So a couple of weeks ago I bought myself a new bed and thought I need a new nightstand as well. So let's get into it. At my local hardware store I found a couple of spruce boards. They are 18mm thick. So I started to cut them down for the frame. There are 5 different boards to cut. 2 of them are the same, there's the side boards, there's the bottom board, the top board and also the back board. We will glue and also screw the boards together later on. All in all you will need about 0.3 square meters of wood. Later on, we will attach the drawer slides to the side panels. So I decided to do myself a favor and pre-drill all the necessary holes. Depending on the drawer slides you're using, the hole pattern will be different, so make sure you read the instructions correctly. In my case, I bought the cheapest drawer slides you can even buy. You can't even disassemble them. They have a thickness of about 9.8mm and they are 16.5mm high. As I said before, I pre-drill every hole and also attach the drawer slides into place. Be also careful that the screws you're using are not too long for your side panel boards. After preparing all the drawer slides, we can continue to the backboard. Like I said in the beginning, the backboard will be screwed into the 2 side panel boards, the top board and also the bottom board. So I started pre-drilling and also pre-marking here the holes for all the different screws I need. I used M6 screws with a length of about 60mm on all the 4 sides. I also countersunk all the holes to make the screws flush with the board. So all the boards were cut down, the drawer slides were attached, the backboard has the pre-drilled and also countersunk holes. So everything was ready for assembly. As you can see, I used typical wood glue on all the necessary sides. And right here you can see where I forgot some wood glue, so I added some onto the backboard as well. To hold everything together and also tighten up all the boards, I used some clamps. I also have those special corner clamps. They make attaching the boards to each other and also making them straight super easy. To make sure everything was perfectly fixed together and also perpendicular to each other, I used the right angle. So back to the backboard. As you can see, I clamped everything together. So pre-drilling the side panels and also the bottom board is necessary to counteract tear out. I attached all the necessary screws and the holes. After a couple of hours, the glue dried and I could attach the top plate to all the frame. So, depending if you want to attach the nightstand to your right or to your left of your bed, you need the overhang on the right side. In my case, I wanted the nightstand on the left side of my bed, so I needed the overhang on the right side to attach the aluminium profile later. I attached wood glue again, looked for all the heavy stuffs in my basement and attached them as weight. After the frame is done, we need to cut down the boards for the drawer. I used 10mm MDF for the inner case of the drawer. I've cut the 2 side panels and the front and the back panels as well. The floor plate needed a groove to be attached, so I attached the height of my table saw to be the accurate size. I made sure that I had the highest point of the blade. So it was time for cutting the groove. As you can see, I also already added a groove for the drawer slides as well. My button panel was a little bit thicker than my plate, so I attached the table saw just a tiny bit. To make sure the cut was perfect, I gave it a little try. And it worked perfect. I started the auto assembly function and the drawer assembled itself. I just needed to add a little bit of glue and fixed everything with screws. As you can see here, only added glue to the groove and totally forgot to add glue on each panel. Later on I fixed that problem. After the main structure was done, I needed to add a little front cover or front panel, however you want to call it. I already cut it to size. The front panel needed a little groove to open the drawer with your fingers. In the end, you would see what I mean. Therefore, I attached it to my workbench with some clamps. I also printed myself a little guide with my printer, which you can see here, so I can easily use my router. I attached the guide with some double-sided tape to the bottom of the front cover and made sure everything was super tight. Fortunately, a lot of tear out happened due to the deep cut. But this wasn't really a problem, because this side will be glued to the drawer later on. After a little bit of sanding, I could attach the front cover right to the drawer, like I said before. I used a lot of glue here. Unfortunately, I also added a lot of glue where it wasn't really necessary, which you can see right here. I added 2 holes, countersunk them, and also added 2 screws to fix everything perfect. I also added some putty to make the holes invisible. After everything was assembled, it was time for sanding. I started with 40 grit and continued all the way up to 220. I sanded down the frame and also the drawer. After sanding, it was time to add the stain. I decided to use a light brown shade, and I think it was the perfect decision for this board. A little trick: if you had trouble getting the stain into the corners, use a toothbrush and brush the stain in and out of the corners. This works perfectly. After you brushed in the stain into the corners, use a towel and wipe off the rest. I've continued staining the whole frame, in and outside, all the surfaces, all the corners, and even used the brush from time to time. After staining, it was time for clear coat. I used a simple clear coat from the hardware store and applied it with a brush. After the first coat had dried, I sanded with 220 grit and applied a second coat. Let's build the glass pot, the aluminium profile. We need the aluminium profile to put the nightstand right into the frame of the bed. So I started by marking the length of my bar, which is about the length of the nightstand. fixed it to my workbench and used a simple saw to cut the aluminium. You can also use a jigsaw or even a table saw or any other electric saw if you have the right blade for it. I wanted to attach the aluminium profile with 4 screws, so I had to pre-drill them. Unfortunately, the first drill I used was really dull, so I had to change the drill in process. Always, I also countersunk the holes to recess the screws later on. Next step was to attach the aluminium profile to the frame. I turned the frame upside down and put the aluminium profile right onto it. I also used a little clamp to hold the aluminium right in position for drill. Next, it was time to add the drawer to the assembly. Unfortunately, in my case, everything was super tight, so I had to wiggle a little bit and also push the drawer straight in. The assembly itself is super easy. On each side, 2 screws. Now it's time for the fun part, attaching the nightstand to your bed. I used a little stick to hold out my mattress, put the nightstand right into the frame, remove the stick, and it's done. Super easy and also looks great in my opinion. So there you have it. Super easy project, well under 50 bucks, and it's a floating nightstand. If you're interested, you can find plans and everything I used, and also detailed information about every step on my homepage ToTechBase.com. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you the best for your build.